How many times can a mother's heart break before it forgets how to hope? In one quiet village, there lived a woman who learned sorrow in a way no human should. Each time she brought a child into this world, the world took that child back again and again and again until the people stopped calling it tragedy and started calling it something far more terrifying. Welcome to Tales by Mo. Please be a part of our community by liking and subscribing. Your support helps us grow and brings more tales to life. Now, settle in. A new story begins. In a small village in Nigeria, a woman named Shola lived through a nightmare that refused to end. Again and again, her children were born healthy, only to die mysteriously before they ever learned to speak. People whispered that it must be the same spirit returning over and over. 7 times she held a newborn, and 7 times she buried a baby. The villagers knew this wasn't just a string of bad luck. They had a word for children like these, a single, chilling name, Abiku. But life wasn't always like this. Long before her eighth child, Shola had been full of hope. She dreamed of motherhood, imagined a home filled with laughter. She married young, glowing with possibility, and when she discovered she was pregnant for the first time, she held her belly as if cradling the world. But that world collapsed with each loss: a miscarriage, a stillbirth, another infant's funeral. Her husband, Deire, who had once been gentle and supportive, grew distant, then resentful, then cruel. With the first grave, they buried their innocence. By the seventh grave, Deire already had one foot outside the door. But life found its way back to her, and many years later, after the last loss of their seventh child, Shola's womb carried new life again. But one day, upon returning from the market, she found Dere gathering his belongings. Shola clutched him with the last strength left in her weary arms, her heart trembling with fear. She begged him, but he did not turn. His eyes were distant, hardened by sorrow and anger. He would not stay. This child, he said, was her burden alone, and so he left. Shola fell to the floor, the walls of the house echoing her grief. 3 months passed, and Shola gave birth to a baby boy. He was small, soft, and perfect. She called him Tunde, the one who returns. But her heart feared the name might not be true. One afternoon, her friend Fatima visited and lifted the baby gently, but Shola only stared. This one might live also. Fatima's smile faded. She squeezed Shola's shoulder. Don't talk like that. This baby will not die. Fatima hesitated, then whispered, I know someone, a powerful man. Who? Shola asked desperately. They call him Baba Osi. We can go see him tomorrow morning. Before dawn, they walked to a nearby village. They arrived at a compound thick with incense and the metallic smell of old herbs. Baba Osi, an ancient man whose eyes had seen countless spirits, took the baby gently. This child has come before. He knows the path to the spirit world too well. Then he explained, the Abiku is not a monster, it's a spirit child. It is believed that the spirit is a mischievous, often malevolent spirit that lives in a mystical world with other spirit children, a place of endless play. But this spirit has a dark hobby. It makes a pact with its spirit friends to enter the world of the living, be born to a mother, and then, just as its family grows attached, it dies. It returns to its spirit friends, only to repeat the cycle again. Shola's face as she looks from Baba Osi to her sleeping son was initially filled with fear, but slowly that fear dissolved, replaced by a fierce, unwavering determination. What must I do to make him stay? She asked. Baba Osi brought out heavy iron anklets. This is our first weapon. Let the weight tie him to the earth, he said. The cold metal touched the child's ankles, and the child's cries shook the leaves inside the hut. Then Baba Osi led them to a mighty Iroko tree, its branches touching the sky like the arms of an ancient guardian. This is the road between worlds, he said. He made a small cut on the tree and pressed Tunde's palm against it, connecting them. Let his spirit cling to life, he chanted. Finally, Baba Osi gave Shola a name for the child, a name of warning to the spirit world. Kosoko, no Hoe remains to dig another grave. Shola held her child close that night, whispering, You will stay. You must stay, my son. And for the first time in many years, hope returned. Tunde grew, fragile as a new leaf, but growing still. One morning, as Shola ground peppers by the fire, she watched as Tunde wobbled, danced, and played beside her. She lifted him high, laughing and crying. And when villagers heard that Shola's child had lived long enough to walk and talk, something none of the others had done, word spread like an endless river. Shola's child has stayed. The Abiku has chosen life. The tail grew wings and flew across the land until it reached the man who had fled, Dere, Shola's husband. When he heard that his son was alive, his heart beat like a talking drum. For a long moment he stood frozen, breath caught in his chest. Then, before he could think or speak, his feet started moving, slow at first, then faster, then running. He did not stop, he did not rest, not until he arrived at Amo village. Dere ran all the way to his old compound, dust rising behind him like smoke. When he reached the entrance, he stopped, breath gone, heart trembling. There, in the warm afternoon sun, little Tunde was playing in the sand, iron anklets shining softly with every tiny kick of his feet. Dere stood quietly, watching him. Unable to hold himself back, he rushed forward and lifted the boy high into the air. Tunde laughed, and Dere, overcome with emotion, began to cry. At that moment, Shola stepped into the compound from the backyard when she saw Dere holding their son, this man who had abandoned her in her darkest hour. Her body froze. The calabash slipped from her fingers and shattered on the ground. Dere turned, eyes swollen with emotion, and moved towards her as if to embrace her. But Shola took a step back, her face a mixture of shock, hurt, and strength. Our son, he looks well, he said, wiping his eyes. Shola's eyes hardened. My son, she corrected, every syllable carrying years of hurt. The child I carried, the child you left me to mourn alone has conquered death. Dere tried to touch her arm, but she pulled away. Her voice came out low, shaken but firm. What are you doing here, Dere? She asked. Dere swallowed, still holding Tunde close. I heard, I heard our son lived. He then stepped forward, desperate to embrace her. Shola, this is still our home. We built this place together. But she lifted a hand, stopping him. No, she said. You walked away from this home. You walked away from me. If you wish to see Tunde, you may do so. But you will not sleep under my roof. Dere stood silent with remorse. At last he bowed his head. I understand, he murmured. I will stay, but I will stay elsewhere. And so he did. From that day on, Dere lived in a small hut on the far edge of the village, watching over Tunde from a distance, slowly, patiently, trying to mend the shattered pieces of a life he had nearly destroyed. But the world is not kind to what it does not understand. Children in the village mocked Tunde. Go away, Abiku. My mother says you're a ghost. My papa says his mother is cursed. Their words stabbed deeper than knives for his small heart. He ran home, crying into his mother's arms. I do not want to go, Mama. I want to stay with you. Shola pulled him close, her voice steady and warm. Who said you're going anywhere, my son? You are staying right here. Nothing, nothing will take you from me. From the shadowed corner of the compound, Dare watched in silence, ashamed. Regret pressed into his chest until he could barely breathe. He had betrayed the family he promised to protect, and the realization burned. But fate is a tricky storyteller. One hot afternoon, as Tunde played in the village square, he suddenly stumbled. His tiny body shook, and before anyone could reach him, he fell down by the stream. The villagers were alarmed, and a small crowd gathered. A kind villager carried Tunde into their arms and ran toward the compound, shouting at the top of their voice, Shola, Shola, something is wrong with your child. Panic seized her like a wild animal. She grabbed the villager by the collar, trembling with fear and anger. What did you do to him? She demanded. Dere stepped forward and gently pulled her back. Shola, this man is helping us. Even in her fear, Shola's eyes darted to Tunde's tiny ankles. Her heart still believed that he lived only because of the iron anklets Baba Osi had placed. With shaking hands, she quickly examined them. The anklets were intact. Relief washed over her for a brief heartbeat. Without a word, they gathered themselves and set off swiftly, carrying Tunde carefully, racing to the neighboring village to seek the wisdom and aid of Baba Osi before it was too late. When they arrived, the old man examined the child and immediately began his work. He chanted and sang songs older than the village itself and threw sacred beads onto the reading mat. The air grew thick with incense. After some time, he turned to Shola and Daire, his eyes heavy with warning. The spirits are not satisfied, Baba Osi said. Something has changed. What are the spirits saying, Baba? Daire asked. They demand a white goat, 7 yards of white cloth, and a silver bracelet. Without these, he will return to them. Shola turned to Dere, eyes full of fear and fire. He took her hands gently and held them to his own. Everything will be fine, he assured her. Our son will live. Encouraged, Shola nodded and assured the priest that they would have the sacrifices ready. One by one, they sold everything they had. But Tunde didn't get any better. His body continued to weaken. Piece by piece, they sold everything they had. But in the midst of all this hardship, true to his word, Dere stayed. Eventually, Shola and Dere returned to Baba Osi. We have given everything, Baba. What more do the spirits want? Baba Osi simply replied, his face indifferent. I am simply a messenger. At the end, the gods take as they will. Angry at the old man's disregard, Shola stood up suddenly. Nothing must happen to my son Baba, or else I will burn down this village. They took their son and left, never to return. That night, as Tunde's life began to fade, Shola and Dere stayed by his side. They had nothing left to give but their hearts, worn, but still beating with love. As the morning light shined through, Shola rose, seeing that Tunde's breath grew thinner. She feared the spirits had marked his final day. So she ran to the Iroko tree, the bridge between worlds. With a trembling hand, she drew a small cut on her own arm. Then she pressed it against the marking Baba Osi had carved into the ancient Iroko years ago, the mark that tied her son to the spirit world. Take my strength, she begged. If a life must be taken, take mine, but leave my child with breath. A gentle wind swept by, and though the morning air was quiet as a graveyard, the leaves shivered and whispered like spirits greeting one another. And in that moment, Shola understood. The spirits had never hungered for cowries or yams. They sought the kind of offering that grew from truth, sacrifice of the self. Dere had sacrificed his pride and returned. Shola had just offered her own life for her sons. Their shared selfless love had forged a bond stronger than any spirit pact. Back home, Tunde's breathing deepened and the fever broke. When he opened his eyes, they were clear, holding a light that was entirely, unquestionably of this world. The Abiku was real, but so was a mother's love, a father's redemption, and the power of a sacrifice made not out of fear, but out of a fierce, unwavering will to protect. The spirit child had not been defeated by anything but love. He was no longer an Abiku, he was simply Tunde, and he was finally, completely home. Years later, Shola, Dairai, and 10-year-old Tunde returned to the great Iroko tree. They placed flowers at its roots, one for each of his 7 siblings who never stayed. Tunde touched the tree bark gently, smiling up at his parents, and they smiled back with eyes shining, not with grief this time, but with victory.
Thank you for watching. Please show some love and support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Thank you.